It's 9 o'clock. We have a quorum present. Let's get started. Did not enable the waiting room, so it's open and people will just be able to come in as they. If we get Zoom bombed, I will shut the meeting down immediately.
My husband got Zoom bombed on Board of Health, and it was interesting.
Yeah, well, this is the first time I'm chairing a meeting using Zoom, so usually other people are doing it, not me. So I'm the least computer person in this building, so that's why they're all younger than I am. Let's start the meeting. Call the meeting to order. 9 o'clock. Do we have any minutes from prior meeting?
I don't remember.
I couldn't find any, so we'll look into that. Update on financial audit and report. Everybody got a copy of that. Ross, thanks for sending that out on Monday. If you want to go through some of the highlights of it, Ross, and then if there are any questions from anybody who took a look at it, I'm sure Nelia has read it from front to back and gone over everything.
I've read it.
See? How'd I get?
Oh, that's funny.
So Ross, take it away.
Yeah, I'll do my best to recap what's in the report here. We had Tony Roselli do a presentation for the administration board, and there were very few questions. I guess, and perhaps, and you all will know better, but in reflecting the final balance of the general fund, and that's on page 4, because I think that's what people are most concerned with. The ending was 26,421 for the general fund. And my understanding is that Tony is reflecting prior year losses, and I provided you, I believe, with the FY19 audit, which showed a negative figure over the life of the district. And that's why the ending fund balance for FY20 is where it's at. The actual account balance was more on the order of about 150,000, but he was accounting for prior losses. He had a couple of recommendations, and that's actually what drew some questions at the admin board meeting. One recommendation was with the treasurer. The treasurer holds our check stock, and Tony pointed out that that could potentially be a source of liability, meaning that if the treasurer has physical control of check stocks, that there's a potential for one to write oneself a check. He is bonded, but it was just brought up as a matter of concern. And also that because of that fact, and since the folks are working remotely, that the district may want to invoke some type of a dual signature process for checks exceeding a certain amount. It was mentioned at admin. There hasn't been further action thus far, but Tony Roselli felt compelled to make a couple of recommendations, and those were some of them. Tony pointed out my mistake, my error at the beginning of the fiscal year of paying the Worcester Regional Retirement bill early. I paid it, I want to say, a week and a half early. And so I've been schooled on that and to not do that in the future. Also, Tony mentioned, and it wasn't contained in the report, but something that he brought up ad hoc at the meeting, and that was a matter of cybersecurity with everyone working remotely to make sure that our treasurer and our accountant were using, for example, complex passwords, with the QuickBooks login, and that they were using adequate virus protection on their computer, that sort of thing. There are more recommendations, I think, with regard to anybody working remotely. So we've begun to take a look at that. And I think the final recommendation from Tony was that we may want to look into doing something with our capital reserves and actually putting it into an account that bears interest. Do you have any questions for me that I could help to answer?
Any questions from any of you folks?
Oh, go
June?
ahead, June.
Yeah, the only question that I really had on that was, I didn't notice if we had any encumbrances here as far as a carryover for possible contract amounts that were going to be due.
You mean for retro?
Yes.
Well, I guess it wasn't, maybe it's a procedural question. And I think maybe that's a procedural question for the finance committee, how you want to handle that, because I think the district language speaks to potentially returning funds at the end of the year that remain or carrying them over and to what end. So being that this is one of the first times we've actually had a positive balance reflected in an audit that we could carry over, maybe that's a question for the body here to decide.
All right, that technically wouldn't be a carryover type thing. If you have outstanding bills as of the end of June 30th of 2020, you'd have to encumber them. I mean, I would assume that the district would be based on the same thing as we are as far as fiscal responsibilities. So I know we talked about that at our last meeting as far as encumbering funds that were going to be needed, but I just didn't see it here on your books or the auditors as far as the actual audit goes.
Okay, I'm not sure that I can answer the question. I think what remains for potential retro for the collective bargaining unit is currently in arbitration. And so I don't know what that figure may or may not be.
Okay. Because my only concern would be is that there wouldn't be actually an additional $26,000 available for funding if we actually have outstanding bills that needed to be paid. That's
Right, I understand the question now. So if there's potentially
Okay.
some that remains to be paid out for FY20, correct?
Yeah.
I think
Fred should know that.
an estimate would be, I seem to recall a figure of about $40,000.
yeah. So technically then there is no extra money available to go back to the towns. That would be my only, not
Yeah,
that I wouldn't like
that's
a check,
actually-
but
Yeah, we had I recall we had a similar discussion when we were talking about the end of FY19 as well.
mhm.
Yeah, and I mean, just basically, as everybody knows, it's just a common thing. You get things ordered, you get them in, the bill doesn't arrive, and you have to encumber those funds, bring them forward to the next year, and then when the bill comes in, you pay them out of the encumbered funds. So it isn't a counting issue that needs to be followed, and that way you can know exactly whether or not 26,000 is surplus or whether or not it is money that is due vendors that haven't been paid yet. That's all.
Understood. Yes. So that it's earmarked, it's spoken for,
Correct.
but reflected as such at the close of it for FY20.
Any other questions from anybody?
I do.
Anna.
So I was reading the management letter, and at the bottom of page 3, it kind of stood out to me that the big errors with the withholdings accounts and the coding errors, in audit speak, I think it's not great. They say most of these errors could have been identified easily by simply scanning the balances. For an auditor to say that, it's kind of like, you guys aren't even looking at your balances. Why any accountant would see withholding accounts that are out of whack, or that to me is a big red flag and should be reviewed monthly.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I'm sorry to have overlooked that. I'm glad that you're reading it too. Tony and I did talk about that, and he had separate conversations with our accountant about it. I think that we're in a much better position now than we were, and that was because Tony, in working with the accountant, talked about how the withholding should be reflected. We're seeing that now with the breakout of the overtime figures, and it is matching up at this point, but you are correct. I was not following along with the accountant last year as we transitioned into QuickBooks. And so, yes, that's on me for failing to do my part of that. And Tony pointed that out. So we're working on that now.
But Fred is a town accountant in other, I mean, he 100% should know how to do withholdings accounts. I mean, I don't know how is he in Sterling? He's the town accountant, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, he knows, I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, my hope is that we'll end up transitioning to another accountant.
Me too.
At the very beginning of COVID, we were talking about doing that. So now that we're in swing again with our finance committee meetings, I'd love to get back on track with that.
Yep.
Could I ask just a quick question? Did the auditors mention having a secondary review? So Fred, in this case, the accountant, he does the numbers, and then could the treasurer or someone else have a secondary review? I mean, I know he did mention here the director, but for example, in our department, the accountant prepares the entries, reconciliations, and then there's always a secondary, sometimes even a third level of review. And I get, third level would be too much for this, for the dispatch, but that second level does always, it does help. And it's even sometimes a second set of eyes catching something. They may not know all the details, they weren't involved in that, but something just looks odd. And just even to bring up a simple, well, what is this, could trigger a deeper look.
Yeah, no, he did not. I suppose to Nanashka's point, perhaps with another accountant, it wouldn't even be necessary for a third review or a second, if you will. Tony Roselli did not bring that up.
Okay.
It seemed to me that he was pointing in the direction of if things were more thorough at step one, that we wouldn't need a level 2 review.
Okay.
Which me, I guess, at level 2 reviewing it. So
I
I think.
Makes sense.
Go ahead.
I mean, even at a level 2, if it did come to that, level 2 could be, and it's higher level, because you rely on the accountant to do the work. And then that secondary review is really more just the variances, what sticks out, just to sometimes the smallest thing can raise a further review. But to your point, I do get that. If the accountant, it seems was different, or there was a little more analysis, and things could be a bit different, but
I think it's clear to me, as we were talking at the beginning of COVID, that there are inadequacies in that area.
yes.
But to your question, Tony didn't make any recommendation for anything more than what you see. The only thing he added, which was not contained in the report, is the mention of cybersecurity, because he had just read something about it prior to his presentation.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I'll just mention one more quick thing. We do use the dual control where we have a second signature. We use 5,000, but I think the auditor said 5 or 10K. And it is helpful in having that control, because at times then the second person could find something, and it would be a larger payment, of course, a larger transaction, and it could find something that again just results in further review and potential change. So it is a good control to have.
Yeah. The logistics of that, so right now I'm not a signer on the account, and it is the board, the admin board chairperson is the second signer on the account. And so it's just the logistics of determining, what size check would qualify for two
Right.
signatures, and how we go about doing that. It just gets a little bit harder with COVID. We would have to hand
Of
deliver
course.
checks to somebody, so I'm open to, whatever you feel is appropriate, obviously, but it was just mentioned at a board meeting, and there's been no further action yet on that.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Alex. Thank you.
The other thing you could do, instead of where you can't have the second signature, is if whoever it is who, I would assume the treasurer, if you could get them to send, or the bank could send you the actual bank statements. So that way there you can actually just take a quick look through and make sure that all the checks look like they're legitimate. You could do that too. So at least there'd be a second set of eyes on it and no missing checks. That's something else just to do, because it might be easier.
Tony's concern, I think, with the two signatures was that because the check stock is remote, potentially a treasurer could write themselves a check and have it clear, before it was detected, and it would be detected eventually, and, he's bonded and we're insured, but in spite of that, a theft could still occur, whereas it wouldn't if there were two signers over a certain amount. Not that it wouldn't be detected eventually. His point was that it simply could occur.
Yeah, well, we actually had that happen in our school system quite a few years back, where we did have missing checks. They were taking them from the bottom of the pile and writing out checks. But again, the difference would be is that you had the person who actually was in charge of the checks was also doing the bank reconciliation. So the checks were not seen by anybody. If that second person had been looking at the bank statements, they would have seen those checks being written out to,
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
just as a little bit of a secondary check and balance.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, let's see. Next item is the update on the FY 2020 budget closeout. And I can bring that up if people wish. It's here somewhere. Is this? Yep. Oh, wow. Lucky. I caught the right one. It was the Nashoba Valley Regional Dispatch District budget versus actuals 2020. Original budget minus FY 20, well, original budget and the FY 20 profit and loss. So everybody got this. Was there any questions? If I'm reading it correctly, we ended with 173,000.
Yes.
No, 27,361.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry.
I had a question about the COVID-related expenses.
Yep.
Are those being reimbursed? And if so, should they be moved out of this account into a grant account waiting for reimbursement?
So we did make notes on the FY 21 budget to actual. And so the short answer is yes. On everything that we could, we're seeking reimbursement through the FEMA grants, which is a 75-25 split. And we've submitted our applications and they're in process. We're hoping to get back about 8,000, 8 or 9,000. I just wanted to reflect though, my notes there that the reason for being over budget in those areas was due to COVID related expenses, but yes.
But shouldn't those have been pulled out then if we're getting reimbursed for them, or?
Yeah,
Well,
they should.
We might. I mean, I don't know that it's a certainty that we're going to, so.
So the auditors didn't want to put, they left that in there? They didn't pull that out?
Yeah, what you're seeing is how it was left at closeout. I don't know if you've done any of the grant reimbursement yet for those, but there is a threshold. So early on, if you don't exceed, I think it's $3,000 in a certain category, you don't even qualify. And over time, as this thing has dragged on, we did exceed that. And so then we did qualify. So, but as to why it was left that way, or if you're concerned about it not being pulled out and reflected in a different category, I don't have an answer for you on that.
So when the money comes in, it'll get booked to FY 21.
Correct. There are.
I feel like it should be separated out because it's not really a typical operating expense.
At least a separate line item, maybe? Is it listed as a separate?
No.
No, it's combined.
So maybe just do it as a separate line item, maybe?
Sure. What would you would like us to go back and itemize all the COVID-related expenses and cull them out from the other line items, put them as a separate, something separate?
Well, there
kind of-
must be something because you're gonna have to do the reporting for the COVID expenses.
Mhm.
So there has to be a spreadsheet somewhere with them.
Yeah, I do, because I've already had to do the report and submit the application grant, yeah. But as far as what you'd like changed on the book, you'd like us to go into this and just let me know what change you'd like.
Well, I wouldn't change
you'd
FY20
like.
since that's completed.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
you
already
can't.
done.
That's in the past. But I do
Okay.
think for FY21, it should be pulled out.
Yeah, it should have
That's
its own
my
line.
personal opinion.
Ross, what was the COVID-related expense for buildings and grounds maintenance?
A couple of things in that category. The largest expense was a reconfiguration of the lobby. So the way that either the public or employees or deliveries get into the lobby, we had no way of remotely locking and unlocking the doors. I think that was the original intent when the building was laid out. And that was electric door strikes were put on both doors so that dispatchers could allow people to get into the lobby to leave packages and things. And then the rest of it was cleaning services, additional cleaning and disinfecting for the dispatch center. We had a service come in and do decon.
Warren. Hey, there you go. Well, I just muted Warren. The radio was going off. Question on that. Every time I visited there, I had to get buzzed in. So wouldn't deliveries have to get buzzed in too?
They do. So both doors, one door did not have the ability to
Okay.
buzz. And the way that the front doors buzz is only from a limited number of consoles. You could only do it from a certain desk. So if somebody showed up at the door and that person was busy, you wouldn't get buzzed in at all. And then once they were in the lobby, we wouldn't be able to, we had a camera added to the lobby because we had blind spots in the lobby. You couldn't see what somebody was doing.
Okay. So were there any more questions on this? With regards to the 27,361, going back to previous question, was that should that have been encumbered, and were there bills associated with that 27?
Yeah, nothing except, I think, to the point about an encumbrance for retro.
So then the 27,361.58 was remaining at the end after all bills were paid, after encumbrances, so forth, so on. Okay. I'll stop sharing that one. Are there any more questions on that? I believe the next one. Oh God, never realized that they move around after you open them up. Let's try this one. There
Doing
we
good.
go.
For somebody that claims they don't know technology, you're doing good.
Exactly.
I know. Someone showed me how to share, and I become the sharing king. The reality here is that when you go back, close one and open it up, go back to open up another one on your screen, they move around, so you got to track them. This is the current FY21 budget at 37% completion. What if you want to walk us through it, Ross, and give us what your concerns may be, and then if anybody else has any concerns regarding the budget, then.
Sure. So right now, and you may have heard, we've approached the admin board chair and asked if one or more communities would be willing to do their H2 payment, the second half of the year assessment payment early. We rely heavily on grant reimbursement for payroll. We receive almost $800,000 in a support and incentive grant every year. And we were awarded in September, and so we've been applying for reimbursement for each pay period. Normally, the projection on that is 30 to 45 days, and so we would expect to receive that sometime around December 1st. However, history with COVID in my tracking has shown that sometimes that's upwards of 60 or more days.
Wow.
And so it wouldn't give us much breathing room between receiving or beginning to receive those and the next scheduled H2 payment is January 15th. And so we've already been given commitment from one community that they're going to pay early. That's Lancaster. If we could do one more, that would give us breathing room between when we, the scheduled invoice date and when
We
we.
could pay early.
Great.
You send
Okay.
us the invoice, we can pay it.
I was
will
gonna
do
say, if you send an invoice, they should be able to go out within the next,
This-
few weeks.
This is the
That would
first
be
time
fine.
this is the first time I've heard of it, Ross. Nobody's contacted me, so feel
Yeah,
free to
me
send the
neither.
invoice.
Okay, that would be great. Then thank you. Let's see. I think Townsend already received their transition award. Bolton will be receiving theirs. So when I send out Anachka, when you get your invoice for H2, it's going to be discounted slightly because of the transition award that you're going to get. I want to say it's about 16,000.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to point out with overtime, and you'll notice from looking at the closeout at FY20, the overtime always runs us over budget, but we're under budget with regular wages because we do not have our full complement of dispatchers. So it's been like that for a couple of years now. At this point, at 37% completion for the year, we're up a bit more. We had one employee that was out for, I want to say, about 11 weeks on FMLA, and that was all covered with overtime. So it was a little bit more of a disproportionate hit at this point in the year.
Excuse me, Ross, did you include that, if that was COVID related, did you include that on your
No.
request for reimbursement?
It was not COVID related.
Oh, okay, all right.
I'm also concerned about state unemployment. We talked about this last year in our budget cycle. It was well over what previous years had been. And we've talked to them. I still don't understand precisely how the formula works for this. But I pulled up reports about previous years, where we were at last year. Our unemployment insurance used to run about $4,000 to $5,000 a year. Last year was closer to 17. This year looks like, in spite of, there's some kind of a factorial with your wages about how they calculate it. And it's been trending down, but it looks like the end of this year, we're still projected to have that cost us around $10,000 or $11,000. So that's going to be over because we had conservatively budgeted for 4,000, and that's going to be over.
Have you had any fraudulent unemployment claims?
We have not. No. I think there's two things. One, it's just not that factor that they use in the formula isn't trending down as fast as we thought. And also, since our wages are up a little bit with the wage increases from last year, it is what it is. I have some other comments on here with the different line items. I'm just looking to see if there's anything that may require explanation.
Was there a reason you didn't pay the whole Worcester retirement? Was it a cash flow issue?
Correct. Yeah. So with regard to the assessments, the decision was made at the admin board level to have it on July 15th and January 15th. The district had asked to have it annual up front. And in spite of the July 15th date, we did have, for whatever reason, payments come in much later than July 15th. Understanding the warrant process and all of that, I think the timing for each of the communities is different. Some of them came in quite a bit later. So yeah, it was a cash flow. Right at July 1, it was a cash flow issue. Much like we're running into right now where we're waiting for our support and incentive grant to start cycling in. We're running into the same issue, waiting till potentially January 15th. You'll see noted on this a couple of remarks about COVID-related work, and there's a note that with the buildings and grounds, we're waiting for reimbursement. It looks good. The application's been proceeding right along. We provided all the required documentation, so we're just waiting for final approval on that, and that's a 75-25 split, which off the top of my head, it's about $8,000 that we expect to get back across all the different categories. Any questions for me?
Anyone have any questions for us? Okay, we'll stop that. Let's see, where are we? So that was the update on the 21. So Ross already went over any financial issues that he sees. He went over that when he did 21. Is there any other business? June?
I was just wondering if it would be possible for when we meet is not only do we see these, but if we can also get a copy of the trial balance. That way there, we can also see where we stand cash wise. And also that would, if and when you do the encumbrances, that will actually show us too what's still outstanding. And it will also let us know what we've got actual cash wise in the capital account.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because that
And
way
if
there,
we
if we
could-
can see that you're having the cash flow issue, then we know, okay, well, maybe we need to relook at how we do this or.
I would appreciate if we could get it the weekend before our meeting.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Could I ask just a real quick one? And I understand the cash flow might not be there right now, Ross, as you mentioned, but if it's okay, we were thinking, I'll check internally on our end of sending out an invoice for the loan. Do you
Okay.
have, I get that there's so much else that as far as cash flow that has to be done, but we figured at least get it out, and then it's on your records that you've been.
Yeah, I think that would be better. I believe last year I created something, so if you could invoice me for that 63,000, that would be good.
Yes, yep. We ended up
Yeah.
creating it internally and we did get it to you. It might have been December, a little bit later, and we might have done it in half and half, but if it's all right, we'll do
Oh.
the full amount. And
Exactly.
okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Could I just get a yay or a nay on who wouldn't mind being invoiced early then? Was it Harvard and Bolton and
All of us, I think.
all of you? I'll
I-
send them all.
I
Send
just
them
have
all
to,
out.
I have to check on my end, but you could definitely send the invoice. It'll go through the routing, and the approval process. So, but of course you could send it.
I'll send them all out then this week.
Sure.
That'll be, thank you.
Mhm.
Just make things easier than waiting.
Makes
And
sense.
Bolton's will have the transition award credit on there. So I'll need something from Don that says he's acknowledging receipt of the transition award credit. I
Okay.
have to show that to State 911. Great, thank you.
Is there anything else from anybody? Any questions? Our next meeting, if I look back over my shoulder, I circled it, is the 9th of December. It will be the same time on the same format. I will send out the agenda ahead of that. And I think at that time, Ross, we're going to need you to provide us with your FY22 budget so that we can review it, go over it, ask questions, and then deal with that over our next meeting after that as well, and then finalize it and send it off to admin.
What was the date?
The 9th
Ninth?
of December,
8th or 9th?
9th, it's a Wednesday.
Good. Is it fair to say that all the communities are expecting level funding as far as the assessment?
Oh, yeah.
Question. Understood.
Very fair to say.
I expected that.
Well, yeah, you can expect it, but again, the unions, even the unions in our towns don't expect it, so.
It's going to be an interesting budget year, that's for sure.
It already is for me.
We began with a 5% cut to all departments.
Ooh, including salary?
No, that's going to be handled separately, but yes, that's coming too.
Wow.
Yeah, ours is level funded, but then you have to put together what that 5% budget would look like. That was a fun exercise.
Wow.
Fortunately, our budgets were cut last year as well as going into it this year as far as level funding. So this is 2 years in a row, no raises, no nothing. So just contractual increases.
Yeah. There's nothing else. Then we need a motion to adjourn.
Make a
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah. Usually that's not too slow. So, okay, it was nice seeing everybody.
was good to
There
see
was a
everybody.
Yes, it
motion.
was.
It was seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.